evening and welcome to our program, Jones and Company. I'm your host, Christian Jones, and joining us on this special edition of Jones and Company are two very important guests. We have joining us Bishop Neil C. Ellis, the visionary founder of Mount Tabor Church and Global United Fellowship, and to his right, Mr. Rich Black, the CEO, publisher, and editor-in-chief of ONIX magazine. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here, Christian.
The last time, Bishop Ellis, you were on our program, we started by talking about your legacy, your retirement, and the impact that you have had on not only the Bahamas, but the wider world and congregations that you have touched throughout the various different continents. We are discussing this evening the selection, or your selection, for the Man of the Year award by the staff of ONIX magazine. And when we talk about the impact of you, Bishop Ellis, you know, I didn't get a chance to mention this story to you the last time that we spoke, but off camera I was mentioning to Mr. Black that I had gone to law school. And I remember studying for my law degree, we had the Prime Minister of the Bahamas at that time, Dr. Hubert Linus, visit the United Kingdom, and he held a diaspora meeting. And we were in a conference room in Westminster, probably about, I want to say, well over 300 or 400 people were there. You had Bahamians, you had government officials who had joined on the trip, as well as people throughout London, Westminster area who came for that diaspora meeting. There was a gentleman who has now become a good friend of mine at the time, but then we were just college students. And he went throughout the room and worked the room and shook everyone's hand and introduced himself to everyone as Neil Ellis. And everybody looked around with confusion as he moved throughout the room, shaking hands and introducing himself as Neil Ellis. And he did it, you know, just as to be mischievous. But everybody in that room knew that he was not Neil Ellis. And it reinforced to me that, you know, over the several decades of ministry, of public involvement in our country, that the name Neil C. Ellis has come to hold a specific relevance and to be a household name, not only for 420-odd thousand Bahamians, but for a diaspora outside of the country, and for many people around the world at large. So I have to say, Bishop Ellis, it's good to sit down and talk with the real Bishop Ellis.
Well, Christian, you know, thank you for that story. You never told me that. But I have always admired your dedication and commitment to the family legacy. And I applaud you for the work you've been doing once your father was elevated to the great post of ambassador, Bahamas ambassador to the United States of America, and may I dare say, doing a stellar job there. And but to see how nothing has fallen, you and your sisters have taken up the mantle and walked forward at a steady pace, carrying on the work that he's laid down for you. And so I applaud you. The last time I was here, I think this was almost around your first time. You were doing this particular show. I retired in December of 2022. I remember that conversation, but it's good to be back talking with you today.
Right. It's good to have you here. Mr. Black, it's a pleasure to have you here and to meet you as well. In preparing for this interview, I had the opportunity to learn a lot about you. So it's good to have the opportunity to speak to you and to ask you a lot of questions in terms of the impact that your publication has had, not only in Central Florida, but throughout the United States of America, in dealing with issues that face African Americans and Americans at large. And the first question that came to my mind in studying and looking at some of the things that ONIX magazine has done, and a lot of the people that they have honored throughout the past almost 30 years in existence. And the first question I come to is really a curiosity in the name, ONIX magazine, and the word ONIX. What does the name ONIX signify for you in the context of African American identity and culture?
Well, as we think about well, first of all, let me say thank you for having us. We're really excited, and kudos and dittos to everything that the bishop has said about you. I've done my research, and I realize that you're doing an awesome job in absence of a father. And that's what it's all about, legacy building. And that's what ONIX magazine is all about. What does ONIX signify? ONIX is a stone, a black stone. And so versus saying black magazine, the founders of ONIX magazine, which was Lester and Lillian Sears, they called it ONIX magazine, which was the stone. And as we move forward with the celebration, we wanted to do something with ONIX magazine that would sort of kind of celebrate and go against some of the negative stereotypes that we would normally see in the news, or we would see in the media, or see depicted in movies and different other mediums. So we decided that we would have a magazine that would be a celebration, something that was inclusive of all people. We tell people we're Afrocentric but community inclusive, which means that we have a place at the table, know who we are, and we know what we bring to bear. So when we started the publication with ONIX and Lillian Lester Sears, the movement was to celebrate black people and that of the African diaspora.
Right. And, you know, we spoke about it a bit earlier, but for the edification of our viewers, Bishop Ellis is the recipient of the 2025 Man of the Year, Person of the Year award.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and Bishop Ellis has been, decorated. He's been the recipient of high honors by our country. He is commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. He as well was our JCN Person of the Year in 2013. But in terms of his selection as Person of the Year, and we spoke a bit about the impact, the tremendous impact that he has had throughout our country and throughout our world when we talk about being a fountainhead of Christian strength for, I would say, millions of people who are around our world. What went into the selection of Bishop Ellis as the Person of the Year? What was the, I suppose, the greatest accomplishment highlighted by Bishop Ellis that made him the person who ought to receive this award?
Well, with the Men of the Year, we look at leadership, we look at the impact of community, we look at a litany of different things that you have done in the way of contribution to making a difference in the lives of others. We look at what you give as it relates to vulnerable communities, how you uplift those communities. And when we look at the landscape, if you will, of what he has done, we just said unanimously this would be the person that we will select. When we look at what's happening in America at this time, in which there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of division, we wanted to bring someone to the table who spoke to the positive, a man of dexterity, fortitude, a person who was on the forefront as Martin Luther King and also Mandela, who spoke to the people. And I think that this is his season. He's a man for this moment. And we decided that this would be the better person, the better choice for our Man of the Year this year. Although in the past we've had the Global Impact Award, which was presented to Prime Minister Davis. We've also had Consul General Hollingsworth, Woody Wilson of Bahamas there. But we've never had one to rise to the level Man of the Year. Out of 24 outstanding men who are making outstanding contribution in community and business, he trumped them all. So he would be the leader of the class, and we have a very outstanding class of men who will be celebrated this year.
Right. And Bishop Ellis, it's a long way from talked about that the last time I interviewed you. It's a long way from Porgy Bay, Bimini. And, you know, it reminds me in terms of what Mr. Black said. I saw a documentary the other night on Jackie Robinson, speaking about, you know, the athletic prowess of several African Americans, a lot of them even from the Caribbean and the Florida area. And they spoke about, you know, in the early days of you know, African American involvement in, take for example, boxing, when they would announce a fighter of African American descent or origin out of the side of the ring, they would say before they announced his name, and fighting out of so-and-so corner,
Right.
a credit to his race, and then they would say his name. When I could think about the selection of Bishop Ellis as being, you know, the first Bahamian who has been recognized by ONIX magazine to this extent, I can only think of that phrase, a credit to his race. Bishop Ellis, in receiving this award, and especially Mr. Black just spoke about social justice, and he made reference to Martin Luther King Jr. And you, Mr. Black, has been recognized by the NAACP. You yourself have been recognized for your contributions to social justice. How has your faith informed your view of social justice and the social issues, not only faced in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but around the world?
Well, you know, when I grew up Christian, I used to hear this phrase from my grandfather. I used to hear this phrase from my father, my mother, and other significant others in my life at the time, that a life without God is like a ship without a sail. You're just floating. It's just, you don't know where you're going, you don't know where you're going to end up. But my faith has always been my anchor. And so when the storms of life assailed, when enemies attacked, when things were going contrary to what I had planned, my anchor held. And that kept me grounded. Because I've come to understand that life is an interesting mixture of good and bad. So there are ups, there are downs. There are days when you're smiling, there are days when you're mourning. The days when you have, there are days when you have to do without. So life is just an interesting mixture. But that anchor, once the anchor of your life grips a solid rock, you can't go astray, you can't go afloat because of the winds, the contrary winds, or because the storm is moving in a particular direction. So through all the changing scenes of life, my faith has been my anchor. And my anchor holds today. That's at approaching 65. My anchor holds. Man, you could replace a car. You could replace some clothes. You could replace a house. But your anchor should constantly remain. You know? There ought to always be consistency with your life in several areas, and one should be with your anchor. So my anchor continues to grip the solid rock, and that rock for me is Jesus Christ, unapologetically. That's who my anchor is tied to, the anchor of my life.
Right. Bishop Ellis, there are a lot of people, you know, captains of industry, country, world leaders, who have been able to gain from your spiritual enlightenment. In terms of the role of faith, of religion in public life, and what you try to model for others, what would you say is, or how important would you say is it, you know, the practice of our faith in our daily lives, especially for many of those who are engaged in public life or politics or on a national stage?
Christian, I've tried. I've been in ministry now for 42 years. I've been preaching. This is a grand and glorious gospel. But most people rather see a sermon than hear one. So even though I've been engrossed in my time of preparation for the preached word of God, at the top of my life has been living a better sermon than the one I delivered. Because Paul talks about it as well. In the New Testament, he talks about faith and works. That's where life is. Because faith without works, you have a dead faith.
Yes.
But so I have always sought to give the sermons I preach life by the way I live, by the way I deport myself, by the way I extend myself to others. Because if you preach a sermon, but you're living an undisciplined life, you're living a life that is filled with innuendos and a life where people always have doubts about your integrity and your character, you might as well stop preaching, because you're preaching a dead message, because you're dealing with a dead faith. But it's faith and works. You preach the gospel, that's the theoretical. You live the gospel, that's the practical. Man, when theoretical and practical come together, that helps you get close to the supernatural. And that's where you begin to impact people's lives. I want to, at the end of the day, Christian, I want to hear God say, well done. And I don't think that's going to come just from preaching great sermons. I think it's going to come from the way you live, the way you be a blessing to people, the way you extend yourself to others, the way you lift up others who have fallen, you rescue the perishing, you care for the dying. And Jesus said, when you do these things to the least of the brothers, you've done them unto me. Man, I don't want to do all of these things and then at the end of the day, not hear well done. And so when you get to my age now, at 65, there's some things that are no longer important. Things that were important in my 30s and 40s and 50s. There's some things in my life now I could do without. I could live without. They're not as important as they used to be. What becomes more important to a person my age now who's living a focused life is not just doing things, but doing things you know God has assigned you to do. I've always told the story about how people could continue to climb the ladder of success. Just climb. And then they finally get to the top, to where it is they were trying to go, only to discover that the ladder was leaning up against the wrong wall. So it means you made it to the top, but it was not where you were destined to go. So you spend a lot of I don't want to live my life like that, just doing things. I want everything I do to count and to matter. And the way you measure that is you look at what you're doing and see if it's making anybody else's life better. If it's not, reevaluate and start over.
Right. And I think one of perhaps Bishop Ellis, and I'll speak from a personal standpoint, that one of perhaps your most impressive attributes is this mantra, I would explain it as, and I listened to a recent sermon, or I recently listened to a sermon that you did some time ago, where you spoke about transitioning, and you spoke about this preparation time that you go through, and God taking you to higher plateaus each and every time. And I think about it from where you have come from and where you are now. And I wonder if you ever, I guess, have a feeling of doubt in that, how much farther is it that God is prepared to take you? And even at the point you are in your career, that even though you've moved away from full-time pastoring, that you still have found now in retirement, where God is taking you or where He is directing you, what He is directing you to do in this season of your life. And in terms of, and you have been called a prophetic voice to nations, but in times when you have had to listen to that prophetic voice, even perhaps in times where the road didn't seem as clear. I heard you talk about your ministry, and you said that the first year was hell.
Yes, Lord.
But the rest of the 39 after that,
yes,
were easy.
Easier.
Easier.
You see, Christian, and man, I'm really impressed with the depth of these questions you're coming with. You're making me think. But listen, Christian, first of all, I've also lived with the mantra that your history does not always paint the correct picture of your destiny. So where you started out does not necessarily look like where you're going. All right? I came from Pogie Bay, Bimini. Bimini is one of the smallest islands in our country. Pogie Bay was one of the poorest settlements in Bimini. If you had asked me 40 years ago if I think I would have accomplished everything I did or get to where I am now, I probably would have vehemently denied that. And at that time, 40 years ago, I was a preacher. So I want to set the record straight. We have this treasure in earthen vessels. So even though we have an anointing to do certain things, and we have these prophetic voices that have been gifted to us from God, these are all residenced in a mortal body. All right? And we are human flesh. And so there's frailty. So yes, I've had doubts over the years. But what I have discovered is every time I have doubt and the Lord brings me out, my faith gets a little stronger. But doubt does not eliminate us from this Christian journey. Doubt should strengthen our resolve that the God we serve is always able to deliver. And so as I've looked back over my life and see that God is a God of seasons, He brings you into one season, then He closes that season. But I also know God does not waste people's time. So why would He keep you alive if your assignment is totally over? If you're done, you might as well go on home and be with Him. The fact that He decides who lives and who dies. If He leaves you here on this earth alive, I'm talking to anybody listening and watching me today, the fact that you are alive in your right mind is an indication that life is not over for you and your assignment is not complete. But that does not mean the season may not change. So He shifted me after 36 years as being a full-time pastor into doing some other things, but that I probably would not have been able to do with the burden and the task of pastoring several thousand people on a daily basis, which, by the way, I have no regrets. I've had a great time in ministry, in the pastoring, but when the season is gone, you could tell.
Right.
You could tell because He prepares you for something else.
Right. And as they would say in church, somebody tell your neighbor the best is yet to come.
You've been going to church, or you've been watching my sermons?
I've been watching quite a few. But Mr. Black, let me ask you, the editorial, or your editorial, your publication, is to inform, to entertain, and to inspire the public. in terms of, Bishop Ellis being such an inspirational figure. And, we've talked so far about your commitment to that, to delivering on everything that ONIX magazine has come to represent for people who love the publication. But what is it exactly in the realm of inspiration? And I want to know, because I have this question. It is in terms of the religious figures, and Bishop Ellis is a theologian, but how many religious figures has ONIX magazine chosen to highlight or recognize in the way that Bishop Ellis is being recognized?
He would be the first. Well, he would be the first to receive the to receive the Man of the Year. Now, we've probably recognized maybe 2 other, but never to the top-notch level of Man of the Year. They've never risen to that level. But I would say that the bishop is a faith-based rock star, as for what we see. The tentacles, and I shared that earlier, he's not only involved here in the Bahamas, but his works, the inspiration that he gives throughout the world. I don't know if we would say he is the Pope of the global initiatives as the faith-based community is concerned, but he's definitely speaking to people who need to hear his message, because a lot of folks right now are without hope. And so him speaking, living the life, giving, has made a difference in the lives of so many people. And we just feel that at this time, in this season, he has risen to the level of the Man of the Year.
Right. When we look at the issues that face different communities, and there always should be a focus on celebrating the excellence that we achieve as a people. But how hard is it to balance presenting stories like Bishop Ellis' story, the story of several other successful persons that will be highlighted and celebrated alongside with Bishop Ellis, and also confronting some of the difficult realities that face a lot of our communities in the 21st century and today?
I think currently, as we look at the marketplace, as we look at what's going on globally, I don't think it's so much of an issue of race. We look at Martin Luther King. I mean, he had the march on the Mall, and that dealt with black folks and civil rights. But the thing that caused him to be murdered and to be killed was the March for Poor People. And Poor People was a rainbow coalition. And I think that now we're looking at the haves and the have-nots. Your generation is probably one of the most diverse generation. And I think something happened during COVID. You guys started communicating on those telephones and that social media, and you started sharing information. And we saw a coming together of a generation. And when we look at change in the world, it always came from the young people. So I think that we have now found ourselves not dealing just with black and white issues, as with Floyd and other initiatives that have taken place. I think we're dealing with social justice, that young people and people in whole or in part are saying enough is enough. So as we come together in a space of men of honor, women on the move, it's not so much that it is a black thing as if we're creating an ecosystem of like-minded people coming together to celebrate those things that are wholesome and good.
Right.
Humanity.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Black. At this point, I think it's a very good point in our program for us to take our first break. Before we do, I have to say to Bishop Ellis one more time, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
On being selected for this award, which no doubt everybody would agree, Bishop Ellis for your contributions that you've made both nationally and internationally to the development of man, to the whole man. I think that they would say that you are very deserving of this award. Congratulations to you.
Thank you very much, and I'm deeply humbled by it and express my sincere gratitude to Mr. Black and his team at the ONIX magazine.
Thank you. We'll take this first break on our program, Jones and Company. We'll be right back.